Welcome English 1102 friends. This is a video that's going to hopefully guide you through the research paper and all the processes you need to go through and think about as you're writing, and then making sure you've got your research paper where you want it. So I'm going to start and essentially just go down this list. Hopefully you have chosen your research topic and then completed your bibliographic essay. So when you click on the research project guidelines and information, you're going to jump right down to the research paper. You see here, there's a research paper guidelines checklist. That's mainly what we're going to go through right now. There's also a video guide to the research paper. That's this. And then there's a couple of sample A papers if you're wondering what it should look like. And we're going to glance at those really quickly too. And then down below that, in the more general open module, is the online research and documentation guide. That's from the Purdue University Online Writing Lab. And then there's the Highlands Library's Guide to Basic MLA 8 Citation, which to me is always useful to open up. You might just want to open up a tab and look at it and hold it back until you get to your works cited list. And if you've got a works cited list from your bibliographic essay, you may have already done this, but you can always look at the Library Guide to MLA 8 and just be sure yours roughly matches their list. We're going to look at that too in just a second. I'm going to start by going down this research paper guidelines and checklist, just because on a very basic way it does two things. It tells you the basic components or parts that you should have in the paper, but it also should be telling you what I'm going to be looking for when I grade, and it's a sort of guide to here's the things I'm trying to check off on your paper as I grade it. If you look at that checklist, let me make it a little bigger here. English 1102 research paper guidelines and expectations, the research paper checklist. The research paper for this course should be between 900 words, absolute minimum 900 words, and 1100 words. If you go a little over, that's fine. If you're a little under, it probably means you haven't done enough research, you're not given enough detail. The first thing on this checklist, the research paper should have an effective topic-specific title. You need to have a title to the paper that's not research paper or just some really bland thing about your topic, but something that's going to gives some sense of where the paper is going to go and what you have to say about your topic. The research paper should have a first introductory paragraph that introduces the topic and also presents a well-defined thesis statement that clearly articulates the purpose of the paper and or defines the goals of the paper. So the first paragraph needs to do two things. Same as the bibliographic essay, first paragraph did two things. And it's really the same two things, except the second thing, the thesis, is going to be different in this case. And often what happens is students will use, if you did your introductory paragraph right for the bibliographic essay, you can use a big chunk of it for the research paper because it's doing the same thing. The introduces the topic thing is really, you already did that for the bibliographic essay, so if you want to pull that out and use it again, that's fine. What changes is a well-defined thesis statement that clearly articulates the purpose of the paper and defines the goal of the paper. That's going to be different because in the research paper, you're going to show or prove or demonstrate some point about your topic. Whatever your topic is, your thesis statement in the research paper needs to prove a point about it, or show something about it, or demonstrate some point or idea about it. And the more you can clearly define the goal of the paper, the way you're going to prove your point, the better off your first paragraph often is, honestly. But at the very least, you need some kind of thesis that doesn't tell me this is a paper about this topic, but that tells me what points you have to prove about your topic. Then, and this is what I've gotten the most questions about in general, the research paper should feature at least 3 distinct professional or scholarly sources cited in the body of the paper, either directly by quoting something or indirectly by summarizing or paraphrasing some source. So if you remember, the bibliographic essay called for you to come up with 4 sources. So what this, if you do the simple math here, this is only asking you to use three outside sources in your research paper. What that frees you up to do is, if you did your bibliographic essay and you felt like one of your sources was clearly the weakest, or as you think about your thesis, you realize that one of your sources isn't relevant, that's fine. You still got 3 to work with. You need a minimum of 3 sources used in this paper, and using them in this paper means you cite them in this paper. Either you directly quote something, or you indirectly summarize some idea or paraphrase some point or something like that. But you get 3 resources into your paper, 3 voices beyond your own into the paper. That means the paper should reflect clear integration of the research with the student's own writing and ideas. So you're not just starting a paragraph with a quote and then going on from it. And please never start a paragraph with a quote, because one of the things you need to learn is you can't just let random people walk into your paper and start talking. You need to introduce quotes and then cite them however you need to. If you're going to let somebody come into your paper and start talking, you need to introduce that person by saying, in his book Cars, John Smith talks about how cars started to be manufactured in the early 20th century. Okay, you've introduced this person before you let them start talking. Outside sources should either be used to introduce concepts or ideas, or to support and provide evidence for the student's ideas and claims. So you can use your sources to bring up ideas, and then you jump off of the sources and develop their points further. Or you can come in and you have your own points and your own ideas, and then you bring in your sources and say, see, this person agrees with me. They support what I'm saying. This makes sense. Those are 2 different ways to use sources. But what I'm really looking for on a more simple and a basic level is this scholarly sources cited in the body of the paper. If you don't know what cited in the body of the paper means, for MLA papers, that means parenthetical in-text citations. If you look at the sample papers, you can clearly see that happening. Here's one of the sample papers. It's called Modern Socialization, and it talks about the development of speech to much more advanced methods and social networking websites. Social networking sites have been made possible, and then you see a couple of in-text citations here. This person uses a quote that they are somewhat recent creations. They are built on science and technology. They are built on concepts within social network theory, a preeminent research field. End of quote, parenthetical citation, Sachs, page 81, end of quotation mark, period. There's the in-text citation. This person jumps down, uses another one in the next sentence. Sachs, same thing. And then they jump down and use another source right here, Dunbar. On a very basic level, the way to know that you have done the in-text citation right is, if you say Sachs and Dunbar, well then you scroll down to the works cited list and you see there's Dunbar. Dunbar, first word of the citation, Dunbar. Dunbar connects to Dunbar. Sachs, first word of the MLA citation, Sachs. Sachs connects to Sachs. The way to know what to put in your in-text parenthetical citation is the first important word, the first word that's not like a or an or the first important word of your works cited list. So if you look at this list, Dunbar or Miller or Pollitt or Richmond or Sachs, this is what this person could put in their in-text parenthetical citations. And you can see Miller 377, Pollitt 253. This person has figured out how to do it correctly. Miller to Miller, Pollitt to Pollitt, they're making those in-text citations to works cited list connections. That's the simple rule for how do I know what to put in the in-text citations, in the parentheses, in the parenthetical in-text citations, is the first word of the works cited, whatever work you're citing on your works cited list. That's often the author's last name if you have an author, because MLA citation always starts with the author's last name if you have an author. If you don't have an author, it is often the first important word of the title. And so to go back to the checklist, you need 3 distinct professional or scholarly sources cited in the body of the paper, either by directly quoting them or indirectly, summarizing or paraphrasing. Some students don't know this, and if you have questions about this, you can jump back to the academic honesty and integrity part of the syllabus all the way back at the very beginning of the semester. To avoid plagiarism, you must cite all quotations, summaries, and paraphrases, as well as any facts or ideas that are not common knowledge. Many students have had a high school experience where they were taught they only had to cite quotations. That is absolutely not true. You have to cite any fact or idea that you get from another source. So if you write a sentence and you summarize or paraphrase somebody else's ideas, you have to cite that source, because citation doesn't care about words at all. It cares about facts and ideas, and you need to credit where you got your facts and ideas. So that's where the in-text citations come into play. And that is where you directly quote somebody, or you're using a source indirectly by summarizing or paraphrasing their ideas. Either any way that you want to get your sources into your paper, to use your sources into your paper, is fine, but again, you're going to need to get at minimum 3 sources into your paper. Students sometimes ask, can I use more than the 4 sources I got from my bibliographic essay? I've decided I need more information, or I realize I need to use a different source that covers something that my sources didn't cover. If you need more sources than the 4 that you got for your bibliographic essay, that's fine. If you need to bail out on your bibliographic essay and only use 1 or 2 sources and find 2 or 3 more, that's fine too. Ideally, you use the same sources you got for your bibliographic essay because you did it right and you got sources that are useful to you. But if for whatever, and that's ideal to me because it's the least work for you guys too on some level. But if you need more or need different sources, that's totally fine. The source list from the bibliographic essay to the research paper does not have to match. The research paper should be organized into paragraphs, generally including a beginning paragraph, body paragraphs. So the beginning paragraph introduces the topic, tells me the thesis. The body paragraphs use your sources to develop your thesis, improve your thesis, and support your thesis and explore your thesis. That's where you're really plugging in your sources and developing your ideas and proving your point. And then some kind of conclusion that reminds me what your paper proved and how you proved it. Some kind of summary of where your paper went and why your paper went there. The research paper should have a works cited list at the end of the paper. Again, ideally, you can just copy and paste this from the bibliographic essay. But if you've had to plug in some new sources, cite those in the works cited list too. So it should have a works cited list at the end of the paper that lists all your sources and that is formatted according to current MLA standards. We'll jump into what that looks like in just a second. And as it says, this list is usually the same as or very similar to the bibliographic essay. There is a spot here dating back to the old days when I used to go over this as a hard copy with students. If you are having trouble organizing or figuring out the body paragraphs of your paper in some sort of basic outline format, please be in touch with me and I'll be happy to help you think about what the main points or main pieces or main paragraphs of your paper might be or might need to be, or what direction you're thinking in. I'm happy to help you with this kind of structural organizational stuff if you're struggling with it. Again, there are 2 sample research papers linked under the research project headline, number 1, number 2. Number 1 is this social networking sites paper that I already briefly pulled up with all the MLA citations. You get a bunch of quotations in here showing you how to use quotations. The other one is about religious snake handling. This paper's from a few years ago. Same thing though. You can see right here that this is an example of indirect citation because this person didn't quote anything. Snake handling has long been seen as a dangerous practice and is illegal in some states, and then you get a citation doing. This person's paraphrasing or summarizing some legal information about it being illegal, and then they cite it right there. And then you see right here, here's a good example of a citation where the person has a source that does not have a last name, so you go down to the title. Snake handling is a fairly new tradition in Christianity. Small town in East Tennessee in the early 1900s with a preacher named George Wendt. Then we jump down to the in-text citation, snake handlers. All right, you get snake handlers in the parentheses there, you scroll down to the works cited list, and you see doing, there's the source that they cited in the first paragraph, and then snake handlers under Georgia Encyclopedia. So since they didn't have an author, they put the first two words of the citation, snake handlers. All right, I know you're using the source snake handlers, first two words of the citation in your works cited list. There you go. The other thing that is on the research project guidelines module is the online research and documentation guide for the Purdue OWL, and then the GHC library guide to MLA8. I'm going to go through those backwards just because the GHC guide is really basic, really simple. Because all it's trying to teach you is documentation of sources in MLA8. All it's trying to teach you is when you get to your works cited list, what should come first in that works cited list, what should come second, third, fourth, and fifth. What should come first is the author. If you've got an author, you saw most of those sources had an author that we just looked at in those two sample papers. If you don't have an author, skip that. Number two, title of the source. This would be like the title of an article in a newspaper, or the title of an entry in an encyclopedia, or something like that. The title of a video from a website, something like that. And then the title of the container. Well, the container is the actual website. Like a video on YouTube, well, YouTube is the container, so title of the container. Or title of the magazine. Chapter in a chapter would be a title of a source, and then the book that the chapter was in, title of the container, same thing. Other contributors, you mostly won't need this. Editor, translator, something like that. Version, if you've got a print book like 8th edition or something like that. Number, this is mainly for numbered magazines like volume 8, number 10 or something like that. Publisher, this is the company that sponsors the website or that publishes the book or magazine, if you've got that. The publication date, most books and magazines and newspapers are going to have that with their articles. If you're on a website that doesn't have that, the last copyright date or last update date is going to be the publication date. The location, that's only for books, but books will tell you what city they were published in. And then the URL, if you're using a web source, give some kind of stable URL. And then, if you are struggling to figure out how to use in-text citations or how to cite some particular source, the Purdue OWL MLA formatting and style guide can help you. You can see that they give you an introduction, they give you an overview, and then they give you, if you're struggling with the in-text citations, you can see right here, they will try to walk you through in-text citations, basic in-text citation rules. In MLA style, referring to the works of others in text is done using parenthetical citations. That's what we just looked at in those two sample papers. And then they start giving you samples, they start showing you examples of how to cite things in papers. They give you this example right here of 2 or 3 different ways you could phrase things to cite something. Wordsworth stated that romantic poetry was marked by a spontaneous, and then you get the quote, spontaneous overflow of feelings, page 263. Then they give you another example, romantic poetry is characterized by, quote, spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, Wordsworth 263. Those are 2 different ways to phrase things. You didn't need the Wordsworth 263 in the first one because they told you in the actual body of the sentence. Like if you write a sentence that says, in the book Cars, and then your citation at the end is just a page number because you've already said the source in the actual sentence. Same thing they've done here. Wordsworth, then you only need to cite 263 because they mentioned Wordsworth, the author, in the sentence. Here they didn't mention him, so in the parenthetical citation, Wordsworth 263. They just got it in 2 different ways here. And then they show you an example of a paraphrase. Wordsworth extensively explored the role of emotion in the creative process, page 263. So what you get here is 2 different ways to use a quote and then a way to use a paraphrase and then a citation at the end. All of them, you could read that sentence. Any of those 3 sentences would then, if you wanted to go look it up and find it yourself, you go to the Wordsworth book, page 263, and then you could find it. Always remember that the goal of all in-text citation is to get you to the right works cited in the works cited list. And then the goal of the works cited list is to make it so that you could easily go find the original source and recreate that research if you wanted to. They give you all kinds of examples like that. Like here's another example where they're showing you how to cite something two different ways, and then they're showing you why this looks the way it does, because here's the works cited in the works cited list. They are giving you some examples of how to cite something if it doesn't have an author. Same as the snake handling example that we just looked at, Impact of Global Warming, which is the title of the article. And the title of the actual article is Impact of Global Warming in North America, but they used enough important words in this in-text citation to clearly get you down here to Impact of Global Warming in North America. That's how you get your work cited. If you need more help, this page, the MLA style guide on the Purdue OWL, will then walk you through. This is the in-text citations, and they will show you how to format quotations, how to introduce quotations, things like that. And then if you're not sure how to use some source, they will then take you through how to cite books, how to cite magazines, how to cite electronic sources like websites, and then how to cite other common sources like podcasts, movies, other kinds of videos and recordings, all kinds of other stuff. So if you're struggling to figure out how to cite something either in text or in the works cited, you can have a look at this, or you can just be in touch with me and I'll be happy to help you look it up, find the answer. What that should do is get you through the research paper checklist and what I am grading for in this research paper. 900 to 1100 words, topic specific title, introduction and thesis in the first paragraph, body paragraphs that use your sources to develop and support, improve your thesis, and then some kind of short conclusion that reminds me what you proved and how you proved it, and then a works cited list at the end. Hopefully this video is helpful to you in terms of getting started writing your research paper, but also as you finish and think, have I done this right? Have I got everything Sullins is looking for? Well, go through this checklist and be sure. Because this is basically how I'm going to grade the paper too. Have you got these key elements, and how well are you using these elements that I've told you about in this checklist? As always, if you've got questions, be in touch with me. Otherwise, thank y'all, and I look forward to reading your research papers.